Hello everybody, my name is Dratnos and welcome to What Corruption Should I Buy for Healers? This is the fourth of a 4-part video series. If you want, you can go in the description and find links to the playlist where you can find tanks, melee DPS, and range DPS. Healers as a role is the role that I know the least about compared to the others. This is one where I've had to rely on my friends. And this is also a role where, for different players of the same spec, even doing the same kind of content, just the play style, how your healer cooldowns are assigned, whether you're overhealing or underhealing, can dramatically affect whether you want to go with kind of general use stuff that helps your damage and your healing, whether you want to go with just pure, full throughput healing corruptions, or whether you want to play some offensive stuff, want to play some damage procs instead. Especially in Mythic Plus, for instance, once you have enough healing to keep everybody alive through stuff, the rest of your corruption budget can go into stuff like Twisted Appendage, like Gushing Wound still. Gushing Wound is receiving a 35% nerf that will be out by the time this video is out, so for many specs, that makes it no longer the best option for damage. For healers, it actually looks like it is still often going to be competitive. If your goal is like doing single target damage in a Mythic Plus setting in particular, Gushing Wound looks like it's going to be a good option for doing that. So for many healers, I still have it here on this list. Just be aware that it's often pretty much the same damage as Twisted Appendage, and it's often less damage than Twilight Devastation, but on more important targets. And Twilight Devastation, doing more AoE damage, but less priority damage. Anyways, without further ado, let's get started by talking about Restoration Druids. So for Restoration Druid, kind of the general corruption that I'd say will work for all cases, like if you just want to have one gear set and do everything with it, I think Expedient is going to be your best bet. It helps out your heals, both your single target and like your tank healing and your Mythic Plus healing, and also your raid healing. It's probably not quite as good as severe at like general raid healing use, which is also here on this list. And it's definitely not as good as Masterful at, healing a tank or healing a few people in a Mythic Plus setting, taking heavy damage. So that's a useful corruption to go for that direction. But the Expedient is also going to increase your damage, which Masterful does not do at all. Expedient also has good synergy if you have a kit with like half Expedient and then half, Gushing Wound. That's a little bit of a combo there, or Twilight Devastation. All three of these damage corruptions can be good for Resto Druid, as can Infinite Stars in fights where Infinite Stars is good. So stuff like Shadhar or whatever actually is something that Resto Druid can make good use out of. For Resto Shaman, one of the best corruptions is actually the Flash of Insight corruption, which very few specs can actually use this thing. Resto Shaman is one of them, though. It is a Ny'alotha weapon-specific corruption, so you can't get it from the vendor. The other corruptions for Resto Shaman, in like a general like raid healing case, it looks like Severes and Deadly Momentums are going to be the best bet for you. If you're trying to do like Mythic Plus or, stats that are... Yeah, if you're trying to heal in Mythic Plus, I'm not 100% sure what your best bet's going to be. Versatile might be a better option for you than Severe. Masterful for like, if you're getting good value from your Mastery, that can be something that's very, very strong, but oftentimes also that, especially against some affixes, Mastery is not all that great. If you're a hard stacked Masterful Resto Shaman and you're trying to heal somebody above 90% to get their Grievous off, it's not going to happen. So it depends on the situation for those stats there, but this is something that I'll be updating based on which builds actually end up working in both High Mythic Plus and in a raid setting. I think in the raid setting, though, it's mostly just going to be Severe and Deadly Momentum. For Resto Shaman, it looks like Twisted Appendage is the go-to offensive corruption. It seems like the other, haste scaling ones, Twisted Appendage, of course, not a hasted proc rate, ends up working better for Resto Shaman, a spec that plays fairly low haste generally. Although it is worth noting the Expedient might also potentially be a good corruption for them. I've seen arguments for almost every healer spec. I've seen arguments for almost every stat. So I've done my best to try and dig through it here, but as somebody who doesn't main a healer, I don't really have my own opinion about which is better. I just have various trusted sources that are saying different things on these things. So again, keep checking the spreadsheet to see updates on those as I make a decision about what is actually good. Disc Priest, Expedient is kind of the thing, like for raids, just Expedient and maybe a Racing Pulse will be a good go-to thing for you. Ineffable Truth is also potentially good. So the thing about Ineffable Truth is like, sometimes it's going to get you another set of cooldowns. If you have a ramp assigned at 2 different points in the fight, sometimes Ineffable Truth is going to let you do another mini ramp in between, or another full ramp even in between those two. But the problem is, you can't really like, even if it would probably get you another proc and get you back to your ramp when you have one assigned, that's not reliable, right? So there are many cases for Disc Priest where like you actually have to sit on an ineffable proc, and like you can't use benefits of the cooldown reduction if it procs and you have an assigned cooldown ahead of you. So it really depends if ineffable is good or not. Really depends on what situation you're in and how rigid your healer assignments are and how risk tolerant you are. If you're willing to risk, a 10% or a 20% chance of having a scuffed ramp when your ramp is assigned, or, if you have a revival you can call as a backup in that spot or whatever, that can be something that makes space for ineffable to be good in your budget. But if you are very rigidly planning out where all of your cooldowns go, then ineffable is not going to be good in that context. It is, though, pretty good for N'Zoth timings in particular. If it's not reliable again, but it will often mean that you get a lot more ramps on good N'Zoth timing, so worth considering there. Other good stats for Discipline Priest, Severe and Versatile in like a Mythic Plus setting, both have an argument for them. I'm not sure what is going to be best between those. That's something that it's going to require some experimentation, and I expect there will be players of most of these healer specs playing different stats and stacking different stacks for different, reasons. If you're looking for a damage corruption, I'd recommend the Gushing or the Appendage. Resto Druid, Holy Paladin, and Mistweaver Monk, I think, make better use out of Twilight Devastation because they are naturally in melee quite a lot. But Discipline Priest is often a spec that stands pretty far back, so not something that you can adjust. You will lose value adjusting your playstyle to make Twilight Devastation good. Holy Priest, I've been seeing Severe look like the kind of main stackable corruption. Again, there's arguments for other stats in particular. Masterful, in some cases, Holy Priests get tremendous value out of their mastery, and it's something that will be just extremely good for your overall throughput. Has no scaling on your damage, of course, besides giving you extra damage globals, maybe if you can heal people up in fewer globals. But the thing about mastery for Holy Priests is that not all fights are fights where you're going to get a lot of value out of mastery, depending on how many other healers you're bringing and just where you're, using your cooldowns. You may find your mastery to not be very effective. You may find it to mostly be overheal, in which case it's not going to be a very valuable corruption to stack up on. Ineffable Truth, 1 or 2 copies of this also looks like it could be pretty good for Holy Priest. And for offense, Gushing Wound, Twisted Appendage, again, would be my recommendations there. Holy Paladin, Ineffable Truth is really strong for this spec because their cooldown is pretty long, right? Wings is on a pretty long cooldown, so if you stack a bunch of Ineffable Truth, basically anytime it procs, you're just getting a huge amount of value on reducing your wings. Wings is such a powerful cooldown as well. You're also reducing Holy Avenger's cooldown, and you're also reducing Holy Shock's cooldown, and you can just get into these moments where you're just like, in a raid setting, I've seen cast sequences where it's like, wings, Holy Shock, Holy Shock, Holy Shock, Holy Shock, Holy Shock, Holy Shock, just for, 30 seconds in a row. So that corruption in particular, stacking it looks really strong. Normally for Ineffable Truth, you're generally interested in the rank 1 version over the rank 2 version. That's because rank 1 is more efficient in terms of value per corruption. Like you get 30% CDR for 12 corruption. That's a better ratio than 50% CDR for 30 corruption, right? That just the fraction is bigger. But for Holy Paladin, you may be so interested in Ineffable Truth that you put Ineffable Truth 1 on all your gear and you still want more, in which case the only way to get more is to upgrade some of those into rank 2s at a, inefficiently, but getting to spend your whole corruption budget that way. So this is the only spec in the game where I will allow you to run Ineffable 2, probably. Maybe some of the others can as well when you've got a huge amount of corruption resistance. Anyways, stats also can be potentially good for Holy Paladin. I've seen Severe, I've seen Masterful, I've seen Expedient, all of those. Actually, I've seen Versatile as well. So filling with one of those, or even having a little bit of a stack of something like Expedient, are things that people have been messing around with. My guess is that kind of, if you're looking for just a general purpose thing for Holy Paladin and you're not interested in building a bunch of different gear sets, Ineffable Truth is just a really safe thing to get. Offensive corruptions, Gushing Wound, Twisted Appendage for single target, priority damage, Twilight Devastation for AoE damage, very good for Holy Paladin. Mistweaver Monks, like Resto Shaman, can make good use out of the Flash of Insight weapon from Nihilotha, but of course, you can't buy that from the vendor. The question, though, of which stat to stack is an open one for this spec. I think that for like a Mythic Plus setting, like Expedient is probably a good one because that has good interactions with both your offense and your defense. It does good damage and good healing, and mana is not an issue for you in Mythic Plus generally. In a raid setting, Expedient would have been the answer before the Rising Mist nerf, but now I'm not sure. I think you probably want some, but not a super hard stack of it. And then you fill with versatile or severe. I'm not 100% sure on that one. So any Mistweavers, let me know what you're doing in the chat, and we'll see if there's a consensus about what's good there. There may also be room for a stat proc in addition to just stat amplifiers. Offensively, Gushing Wound, Twisted Appendage, Twilight Devastation, just like the other melee healers, can all get value depending on what you're looking for. Also, all of these healers can play Infinite Stars, except for, maybe Resto Shaman's not going to get as much value out of it because they're a little bit lower haste than these other healers generally, but still, offensively, that's something to consider if it's an Infinite Stars fight. Ineffable Truth has some interesting interactions with both Rising Mist and also just reducing things like Manatee, and if you're playing Conflict Major in a Mythic Plus setting, Weigh the Crane cooldown. Unlike Holy Paladin and, the pre-specs, your cooldowns that you're reducing are fairly short here, which means that there's a lot more volatility and variance about how good Ineffable Truth is going to be. So for that reason, I would be pretty hesitant to be using Ineffable Truth on a Mistweaver. From what it's looked like to me, it looks like it's not going to perform all that well. But that is Ineffable Truth on pretty much everything is something that you could still experiment with, and there are definitely ways that it could synergize with the Mistweaver kit. So the thing that scares me away is just the volatility, the variance. So anyways, that is my look here at the healer specs. Hope you've enjoyed this video. Definitely the most open question is which corruptions are good for which healers in which settings, and depending on what kind of content you're doing and all of that can dramatically affect your best answer. One add-on you might like is an add-on called Healer Stat Weights. This hasn't been updated in a while, but for specs, especially for Mistweaver and Resto, it's pretty effective at telling you how much value you're getting per point of stat, and that can be a good way of helping you figure out if stacking Expedient makes sense for you in this Mythic Plus dungeon or not. It's a tool, but it is something that can be useful. Another thing that can be helpful for you is just seeing what corruptions people are going for in the context that you're looking at. So, if you're looking at Mythic Plus, you can just see like, hey, what corruptions are people running in for my class in the Mythic Plus dungeon I'm looking at? You find some stream of some healer that you respect and ask them what they think about it. Or for Raid, you can look at Warcraft logs and see what are the top healing parses using on this fight. You do have to be a little bit careful of that because that is almost always, the top healer parse is going to be somebody getting like 10 innervates and 2 wisdoms and nobody else healing on that fight. And people like me standing in void zones intentionally to help them do more damage or more healing. So you have to watch out a little bit for looking at top healing logs that way. You can instead look at like top speed kills and see what the healers are using in those. Those kinds of effects can help you figure out, based on the context you're playing, what corruption is going to be best for you. The kind of, that nuance is not really what this spreadsheet's about. This spreadsheet's trying to give you like a good idea of what would be a safe general corruption to buy, depending on what kind of thing you're roughly aiming for. So hopefully that is accomplished here. But again, I'm going to keep the spreadsheet updated in the comments below, or in the description. There will be a link to the spreadsheet, which I will keep updated based on what you guys say in the comments and on Twitter and Reddit and everything about which of these I'm wrong about. If you found this video helpful, remember to hit like and subscribe. Stay tuned for more content, more educational content, some more tier list content maybe coming soon as well on this channel for both Mythic Plus and Raid, of course. Check out my Twitch stream, twitch.tv/Ratnos. Thanks everybody for watching. I'll see you in the next one.